civil, really, because if we had to go out and destroy, you would kill a lot of people.
Yes.
Just
So,
to get rid of the
so
people.
rather than actually act out the impulses from the id, we get a chance to use the psychodrama and act it out in a symbolic way, have the feelings and everything, and then basically offload, discharge the cathexis, the energy from the id, for a little while. And then we have to do it again and again and again and again.
Would this also explain why there's, in women, we have the desire that we need to have a baby?
Yes. Well,
But
yes and no.
28.
Freud also talked about, and please forgive me when I say this, but it has been experimentally verified. Okay? Psychodynamically, a female wishes to have a baby because that will then satisfy penis envy. I understand how radical that sounds and how absurd that sounds. Okay.
Satisfies what?
Yes, satisfies what?
I heard that when I was in college.
Okay. Let me explain that a little more. Let's take a look. In order to explain that, let's take a look at Freud's psychosexual development of the cycles. All right? He said that there are these autoerogenous zones, these erogenous zones, the mouth, the anus, the penis and vagina, that are erotically charged, physiologically erotically charged. So what happens is, because the infant, from about infancy to 18 months, whenever the weaning process occurs, that is the source of pleasure and the source of nourishment and everything for the child. So that's an oral developmental cycle. Everything focuses on the oral sensations and the act of nurturing through the mouth. So that's the first developmental cycle, and it's a sexual developmental cycle, psychosexual development. Next is the anal developmental cycle, because then the child is concerned with controlling its bodily functions, urinating and defecating. Okay? And so those processes now provide the most stimulus for the child, and also the next conflict that it has to resolve. Because the parents are telling it, do not pee in the bed, okay? Don't play with your feces, don't do all of these kinds of things, and the child wants to do that because that's, it's erotically charged and it gets pleasure from that. And so it's now in conflict with culture. Okay? It resolves that about 3 years. Then it enters the phallic phase, and here's where the concept of penis envy arises. At this time, at the end of 3 years, the child is now up and around, it's moving, it's talking, and its ego is fully developed. All right? It is a little miniature human being at this point, not just a collection of impulses. It can move around, it can do its own thing, it's feeding itself, it's taking care of its excretory functions on its own. It's a little normal human being at this point. And what happens is it gets together with friends of its, okay, and what do? Play doctor. Right, they play doctor. Every culture has this ritual, has this practice that they go through, they play doctor. And what do the children notice immediately? Yeah, there's a difference. There's an anatomical difference between boys and girls. Okay? And so this is the origin of what Freud termed penis envy. He didn't invent this term at random. Again, all of this stuff is coming out of the years, the millions of hours of analysis that have been done by the psychoanalysts who are trained in this method. Okay? And so this is coming from the actual unconscious minds of all of the people who came in for analysis. All of these imageries, all of these notions, all of these thoughts. And it's not just one person, it's all of them. They're all doing this. It's all coming out in the analytical sessions. And so this is where the concept of penis envy arises. The young girl recognizes that there's a difference, and so begins to have envy of the fact that the boy has this particular appendage. Okay? And again, this is going to be at an unconscious level. Okay? So, according to the classical theory, women wish to have babies because a baby is a symbolic penis. All right? Now, like I said, this idea has been kicked around and the feminists grabbed hold of it in the early 60s and tried to just, shred it because it does not make sense. It violates all of our propriety. I mean, it really does. Even to talk about it is embarrassing. Okay? But in the time since Freud proposed it, there have been numerous, from the 1950s on particularly, when we got experimental techniques that were valid and that were repetitive, there have been a number of studies which have not definitively confirmed it, but pointed in the direction of confirming this particular idea of Freud's. Experimentally, not just analytically, not just clinically, but experimental confirmation of this. Now, this, again, we're dealing with very primitive ideas here. We are dealing with ideas that are so primitive that we don't want to even talk about them. We want to keep them buried in the id because they are difficult to deal with at a conscious level. That's why they're there. That's why they're unconscious, because we don't want to deal with them. And if they do happen to emerge, if they do happen to erupt from the unconscious, what do? We ignore them, we suppress them, and if we can, we repress them. We just pick them up and throw them back down. What happens to Oedipus? He can't handle it, he cuts his eyes out. That's repression. That's what's going on here, because these concepts are very difficult to bring out to the open and discuss.
Yeah, but on the same side that penis envy says that we don't have that, men cannot create.
True.
And so it could be on our side, it says that
There is no
creators and the men are not.
There is no corresponding creativity envy on the side of the male.
Yeah, but it's, I guess
What'd you
in
say,
science now, the conflict is that we can create life without the male.
You can't though.
Well, the science is true.
Well, yeah. At this point, we possibly can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that means they don't need women either.
That's true.
Yeah. So, but you got to keep in mind, and this goes all the way back. If we go all the way back to the very beginnings of culture and the very beginnings of civilization, you will discover that all of those early societies are patriarchal. They are male dominated. Okay, not only because the male is historically stronger, physically has more stamina, and provides the seed for the child to grow, but also because this here is the unconscious foundation for cultures. Okay?
He also goes way back and says that the female is the first teacher.
Yes, absolutely. The female, again, don't misunderstand what we're saying here. This is not a denigration of women. Okay?
It's just a struggle.
Right. This is just, what Freud is saying is this is a biological fact.
That happens.
Exactly. And we need to come to grips with it because it's the source of much pain and suffering later on. Because it is unconscious, because we do bury it, because we repress it. It's not a denigration of women. Yeah, this has nothing to do with denigrating the role of women, because you're right. In any culture, in every culture, the woman is the source of not only life and training and education, but nurturing and creativity and health and, the woman is always the major focus of any family unit, always. Okay? Which is also built into this whole system here. Absolutely. And in fact, just a second, I'll get right to that. To prove this, back in the early 1950s, Betty Crocker came out with her cake mix. Okay, that didn't require anything. Add water, bake it, done. All right. So they marketed it to everybody in America, saying to all the women in America, saying this will free up all your time in the kitchen. It's come and get this thing because it's really wonderful. Well, no one bought it. The women weren't buying this thing. And so Betty Crocker, the company, came to one of Bernays' students and said, why aren't they buying this? We don't understand it. We marketed it, as if it was time-saving and delicious and, high-tech and space age and all of these things. They're still not buying it. What's wrong? So he and his colleagues brought together the focus groups of the women, and they discovered that the women weren't buying it because it was too easy. They said, we feel as if we're letting our families down. We're not putting any effort into this thing. There's no love in this. This is just mechanical. Put it together. Anybody could do it, you know. And so the PR people, the advertising people, went back to Betty Crocker and they said, okay, here's what you got to do. You have to add one more step. You have to make it so that they have to add an egg.
And one egg equals love.
Exactly. An egg equals love. And it can only be supplied by a woman. Okay? They said that's all you got to do. And this will resolve the unconscious conflict that has been created by your product. This will resolve that unconscious conflict. They did that. They reformulated it. They now sold it exactly the same way, except it had an egg in it. And, of course, bingo, everybody buys. So, again, this is not a denigration of women. This is just a biological fact of the way that we're designed. And we have to understand the way that we're designed, even at this unconscious level, because this creates the conflict. Later on, this creates all of those things. Okay? So, now, you had a question, too.
Therefore, if those traits in a woman are lacking,
Yes.
then the girl child or boy child are going to be screwed up.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, if the environment does not nurture these kinds of things, yes, the child will be developmentally disabled, essentially, emotionally and psychologically speaking, later on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what about, like, I have a daughter, my oldest
Uh-huh.
daughter is the breadwinner.
Oh, okay.
But this one, she travels all the time, and she really didn't tell her husband, I'll have the children, but you'll raise them. Where does that? I screwed up.
Right. It's always the mother's fault. Okay? Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
One of the consequences of this theory has been a popular assumption that everything is always the mother's fault because the mother's at the center of this. Okay, that's not what it means. All right. What it means is that we're all locked in this very primitive kind of a structure, biologically speaking, and it has all of these primitive motives and these primitive urges. And that's just a fact of life. It doesn't matter what's going on here. This is just because of the way we're designed. It's not the mother's fault or the father's fault or the child's fault. Okay, now, as far as that goes, if we go back, this is a little bit off topic, but not much off topic. If we go back to the mid-1950s and take a look at some Central Intelligence Agency documents, one of the things that they wanted to do was to begin their concerted attack on the family structure. And this was announced way back in the early 1920s from the foundations. They said at some point in the mid-1900s we're going to have to begin to destroy the family structure in the industrialized world. So in the 1950s, the CIA is now saying, how are we going to accomplish that goal? And so what they did was they got together and they created what we now know as radical feminism. And what they did was they went out and they financed all of the magazines that were coming out in the early 1960s. They financed all of the women who were coming out and presenting this as if it were a new idea. They financed all of the ad agencies. They financed and controlled and directed all of the television shows. They financed and controlled all of the movies and did all of these things. And so if you go back and look at like 1960 onward, you will see a steady trend of all of these feminist kind of ideas until about the mid-1970s. Okay? And so what you find is you'll find images in the advertisements, images in the sitcoms, images in the dramas of women just like your daughter, who are independent, who have their own careers. You'll find house husbands, okay? Which they, exactly, but that's what you'll find. I mean, what was one of the most popular TV sitcoms at the time that was beginning to introduce this idea of the man as the nurturer? My Two Sons. Now, they remember he was a widower, so there was no woman in the family at all. But they couldn't just directly go to this idea. They had to sort of ease us into it. And so the PR people, the advertising people, the Freud people said, we have to ease them into this, create a sitcom around a popular character. Fred McMurray was the main character, okay? Have these kids, these boy kids, who are then raised by their father. Okay, and then as we move forward, we see other things, other single parent male, and then we find, and then as it builds towards the 70s, we see this whole thing. Okay, now this accomplishes two things immediately. Number one, the women who are growing up, the girls who are growing up in this time frame, now see images that they are imitating and responding to and saying, hey, I can go get a degree, I can go get a high-paying job, I can go have a career. And so they did, which is a good thing, okay? But behind the scenes are these two hidden agendas. The first hidden agenda, of course, is the ultimate destruction of the family, which will occur on their timetable sometime around 2060, 2007. Okay? But the initial hidden agenda was more immediate. What happens if you have half of the entire population of the United States now working that wasn't working before?
A lot of unemployment.
What's that?
A lot of unemployment.
Well, not a lot of unemployment at that time. Employment was actually pretty good. What do you have? They're earning money, so now you can?
Buy treasure.
No. What can the government do with that money? Tax it. Double your tax revenues. Okay, so these are the things we see if we go take a look at the original documents. So what your daughter is doing is simply responding to this particular cultural matrix that was created back in the mid-50s according to a plan that was introduced in the 1920s. And that's what she's doing. That's exactly what she's doing. And she's doing it very well. And that's, just looking at it, it's a good thing. It's a good thing because we can. Mothers can work. Fathers can nurture. We're certainly, we're humans. We can almost adapt to any kind of a situation.
Well, that's what it seems like, even though they're trying to destroy the family, they always seem to go back to it, though. It's even though we face all of this, it's just like, it's like she did it. It says, okay, the role of a female was to stay at home, take care of the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And then the propaganda says, okay, work. But she still said, okay, well, you're a nurturer.
Right.
I'll take care
We
of it.
still need, exactly.
We still need a baby.
Exactly.
And a family. We still
Yeah.
have the urge
Yes.
to be a family.
Yes, human beings are definitely family and tribally based by design.
By design, that's
Yes,
it.
by
So
design we are. So in order to accomplish their ultimate goal, which is to eliminate the need for family structures, they will have to genetically modify the human species, which is where they are headed with test tube babies.
Oh.
Why
you
would
want- if
they do this?
What's that?
What's the reasoning? Why would they do this?
Because they do not like us as we are currently constructed. We're too independent.
Who's they? The CIA?
Well, the CIA is a branch of them. Yeah, they're the workers. They're the worker bees. The actual people who run the place are the big foundations, which are controlled by the big banks, which are owned by the top 20 families. So if you want to go do the research, you can go out and read their documents. Their actual documents. Yeah, they're out there. They'll tell you exactly what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, how they're going to do it, who's going to do it for them. So that's where we are. Why do they want to do it? Because they want ultimately their final end game is about 100 million people on the planet. Okay, the top 20,000 or so who are rich and wealthy and free, and then the remaining 100 million who are genetically modified, brain implanted, chip controlled zombies, servants. That's their plan. I mean, there was an article. They had like a TED conference. I don't know if it was the TED conference itself, but a technological conference back in 2002. Ray Kurzweil was interviewed, and they basically, you can go out and watch it. You can go out and watch them as they debate this problem. The question is, how many of us they're going to let live? And the title of the article was, "The Future Doesn't Need Us." Yeah.
What does this have to do with meditation?
Because that's what we're facing, okay? We have to, we are in this particular situation right now, and we have got to come up with a solution to it. Otherwise, it's gonna change radically. It may change radically anyway. Okay? The human situation, if we take a look at the Gnostics, what we are looking at right now here is a physical manifestation of their concept of the archons.
So according to Freud, are they hung up in the phallic stage?
Who?
These people who need power over everybody.
It's not, they don't need power. It's not a question of need. It's a question of the fact they're not hung up on any of these stages. Okay? They're beyond this kind of stuff.
So are they meditating?
Yes, absolutely. These people are extremely dedicated. They are very disciplined. They have their own religion. Absolutely.
So
You meet any of these people, and I've met a couple of the lower level ones, I mean, they are intense. And they're serious about it.
so
Well, I was gonna ask the same question he asked, you know, how does this tie into meditation?
Because we need to face the facts. And meditation will allow us to do that. Meditation allows us to cut to the truth.
So that we won't be the zombies?
Exactly, so that we will be able to cope with what is coming sooner than we expect. Okay, remember that the concept of meditation is relief from pain and suffering. Okay? We have had it easy up until now. Pain and suffering that we've suffered and encountered has been relatively mild. That is going to change very quickly before we even know it, which is why I put together this program, because we need to have these skills to face the challenges that are coming in our lifetime very soon. This is no joke. It's here. It's right here, right now. And when they pull the trigger on this thing, we are going to be in such deep trouble that we will have to have all the resources that we have available to us in order to survive it, if we can even survive it. It's here. It's not coming in some distant future. It is right here, right now, breathing down our necks. That's why I put together this program. Okay? We are at the end game. We're at the end game right now. And when this economy collapses, and it will, we're going to be facing the kinds of challenges that we are not used to facing. Okay? And that's why I put together the program. Because we have to have all the resources available to us when it happens. Because the pain and suffering level in the United States and planetary-wide is going to just skyrocket. Personally, for our friends, for our neighbors, for our family members, for everybody, it is going to just go off the charts when they start implementing the next phases of this plan.
When is this gonna be, you think?
Well, it's hard to sort of put a time frame on it. They say they're about between 8 and 13 years behind schedule. But you can see the waves in the future. You'll be able to see what will happen here by taking a look at what's happening in Europe. So the economic collapse in Europe is a picture of what will happen here. It will happen differently here, but it will be the same kind of an effect.
Well, even the ancients prophesied, all the prophecies, all the calendars or anything, they're converging to a certain point. Well, for the Maya.
Right, the Mayan calendar, that is a propaganda meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But that includes the Chinese one,
Sure.
the Egyptian one.
Yeah, but the reason that they all end at this time is because it's the end of one of the great cycles.
Yeah,
Okay?
it
The
is.
people at the top of this place, they know this and they use that. They build towards these kinds of cycles.
Yeah, and then.
Okay? And then they fulfill the prophecies.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to take a look at, if you go back and take a look at the prophecies, they're not prophesying
No.
about what's happening, in 2012. They're prophesying about what's happening to them right that moment when they're writing it. Because this pattern appears again and again and again and again and again throughout history.
So it makes it sound.
Yeah,
like
we're
it's-
standing exactly on the same ground as our ancient ancestors would have stood, like when Alexander the Great invaded and slaughtered everybody in the village, and we were the only 3 left. Okay, so it's not that this is not a unique time in history, but it is unique for us because we were privileged. We grew up in a time when we didn't have to worry about all this stuff. We thought, okay? We had good jobs, we had good futures, we had good educations, everything was looking rosy. We were taught that basically, you know, we were gonna move off into a future like Star Trek, where everything is hunky-dory. No violence, no needs, no wants, no nothing. Okay? And that was simply a propaganda meeting. That was simply to keep us pacified, while they utilized our skills to build the weapon systems and the intelligence grids and the surveillance grids that they now have. Because our ingenuity has provided that for them. You know, us, we, you know, teachers, technicians, scientists, everybody over the last 100 years has provided the people in charge with the technology that they now need to complete their global conquest.
And so you're saying that them are in different, like, CIA?
Well, these are different units that go out and do. Yeah, the people involved often do not know what they're doing. They're just doing what they do. I worked on Wall Street. I was in Standard & Poor's for 14 years. Okay? We worked tirelessly, effortlessly for those 14 years to build Standard & Poor's into the premier bond rating and currency rating agency on the planet. We invested hundreds of millions, possibly $2 or $3 billion over that span.
To do
And
what?
To make Standard & Poor's the #1 ratings agency on the planet. I mean, I was working, you know, I can't even remember, 130-hour weeks. I mean, it was nuts. And we did that. And we put it all together and we got it all ready. And then when it was all ready and it had infiltrated all across the planet and everything was there, what did they do with it? They used it to cause the implosion of the world economy that we are now experiencing. Because they were able to sell all of the derivatives, the $1.5 quadrillion worth of derivatives that are out there, because Standard & Poor's certified that they were good investments. And Standard & Poor's knew that it was not good investments. They knew what they were doing. The people who were actually certifying this knew exactly what they were doing, because they were part of the plan. But me, I had no idea. I was just working in the data center, making certain that all the data was there. Okay, and me and my colleagues and everybody else, we were just doing our jobs and doing it damn good. So that's the way that the system works. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and realize that all of your effort has gone towards an agenda that you didn't realize. So that's why I put together this program. This is the most important thing that we can do right now, because it's coming, the storm is here. And we have to learn these techniques, we have to practice these techniques, because when it hits, not only will we have an increasing amount of suffering, but everybody that we know will. And people who know this, people who know how to do this kind of stuff, will be very helpful. Because we'll be able to bring this to other people. We'll be able to train them. We'll be able to help them. We'll be able to, you know, get through this as best we can.
So then open to us if we, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that when there is pain and suffering in the streets of Pocatello,
Or like our families?
exactly, we'll be able to help them. Even in the utopian world, even if we were living in Star Trek world, we'd still need to know this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay? Because we are what we are, you know, we are pain and suffering. But the storm is coming that will incrementally increase the pain and suffering that we're going to encounter.
But we may be able to help the individuals survive this whole world.
Yes.
But you're not going to change the whole big, great master plan.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, it's not, it may be, you know, I don't know about that. There are other people out there whose job it is to try to sort of change this. We're not among them. Okay? But there are people out there who are working to try to change it. I don't know if they can or not. So for us, we just have to sort of get ready for everything that may be coming. And we know, right now at this particular point, we know that at the least, there is going to be an economic collapse worldwide, because that's already been engineered and it's already in progress. No way to stop that because of the mechanics behind it. Back in 1960, one of the chief economists for the International Monetary Fund named Robert Triffin wrote a book and several papers, testified before Congress saying, look, here's the situation in 1960, you know it, I know it. In 1944 at Bretton Woods, when you guys all decided to create the world economy that you created and make the dollar the world reserve currency, you had a definite time span that you were working with. that sooner or later the dollar will collapse. It happens. If you're the reserve currency, there's a mathematical limitation to how long you can maintain that. Because there's going to be an imbalance of trade. There's going to be all of this imbalance of trade that goes on because you're going to be sending dollars everywhere and they're going to be sending goods. So that big trade balance that we've accumulated since 1944 has a mathematical limit beyond which it cannot go. And in the paper and in the book and in front of Congress, he basically told them, this is where you're headed, this is what's going to happen, here's the sequence. Sooner or later you're going to exhaust your ability to peg the dollar to the gold reserves. So in 1971, we reached that point. Richard Nixon took us off of the international gold standard. Everything is now free-floating currency. Triffin said the next thing that's going to happen is there's going to be an offshoring of industry. Because it's now going to be cheaper to have your industrial plant in Mexico or Canada or China or Singapore or wherever. And so there's going to be this massive exodus of industry from the United States. And that happened. Okay? And then at the end stage, you're going to have hyperinflation as the central bank prints all this money in order to try to compensate. So in 1960, the plan was already there. I mean, we already knew that this was coming. His criticism was that you should have created the world currency in 1944, which is what John Maynard Keynes wanted to do. Don't wait for it. Don't hang out and just try to work your way around it. Create it now. And he said you should have done that because this is what's awaiting the United States in the world currency. So I don't know if there's a way to avoid this, which is why we have to get ready for whatever's coming.
When everything collapses, you're going to have mass starvation, die off of the majority of the population, and then it's going to be set back until the population can build back up to the 100 million or billion that they want.
Possibly.
So,
yeah.
And at that point in time, all of your technology, your production, and everything else is going to crash because you don't have the worker bees to do it.
Right. Will not happen. Exactly.
Yeah. How is the cabal going to survive these 100 years or whatever? How is technology going to survive when you don't have the populace to keep driving that intellectual increased development?
Oh, they don't need any more development. They've got exactly what they need right now. Yeah, they have the components of the system that they need. They have a satellite control grid. They have a satellite surveillance grid. They have a satellite kill grid. That's all they need. They don't need anything else. They would be perfectly happy to maintain this level of technology forever. For them, we're not going to have any access to that, but they will. And all they need is about 100 million people worldwide to farm the land, keep the machines running, do everything else. They're not interested in progress at this point. They're interested in feudalism. Feudalism that is technologically mandated and controlled. Okay? And as far as the collapse, they're already moving. They're already moving offshore. They've got all of these armed redoubts, all of these, underground bunkers everywhere. When it comes, they're just going to go hide until it's all over.
But they don't know that this is what they're doing.
Oh yeah, you can go read all their documents. They know this is a plan. Everything's planned. Yeah, they are. This is a plan. This is a business plan with deadlines and milestones and everything.
So there are some that know.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we can know because they're public about it. You can go read. Publications like Foreign Affairs, which is the primary publication of the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations. They will tell you in that publicly available journal exactly what they're going to do. They are not shy about telling us what they're planning because they know that most of us will never go and read it because they know that most of us are too busy earning a living and raising a family and going to church and doing all these things that human beings do. So while they're out planning and implementing all of this stuff, we are busy raising our families and going to work and doing all of that. And remember, they're thinking in terms of centuries. We think in terms of days, hours, whatever.
What's the name of that book that by that IMF author?
His name is Robert Triffin. And the book is called Gold and the... I think it's called Gold and the U.S. Currency. Hold on just a second. It's been a while since I've looked at it. So we'll go find it.
Something my experience though, even though
Uh-huh.
this is a plan, I have hope, or even with the meditation, stuff like this. I find that even with the best laid plans of mice and men, it doesn't exactly work out the way we think.
It doesn't work out the way you think. They never fail. They have never failed in the history of the planet, ever.
Which is, okay.
Yeah, we fail. Why do we fail? Because we don't have the resources they have.
Yeah, but we're still,
Gold in the dollar prices. There you go.
oh,
So there's the two versions. They're both at the library there. It's very readable. It's very simple. Some of it's technical, economic speak, but a lot of it is just really straightforward and simple. We can understand it. He has the first thing is the transcript of his testimony in front of Congress, where he basically outlines this whole thing. And he's just there to say, look, we know this is where we are. This is where we'll be. So maybe you want to think about changing it before that all happens. You see, and my point is that they have all the resources available. They do not fail.
that's true.
Yeah, because they do not take no for an answer. They don't take failure for an answer. Ever. If there is a failure, they correct it. And they move forward.
Maybe that's why it takes centuries.
It does. Centuries and centuries. I mean, they're moving the entire planet. They're moving the whole thing. And you've got to admire that, because this is, like I said, they are dedicated. I've met, like I said, some of the, they would have been, not like at the upper high reaches of this thing, but right sort of in the middle, because I worked for them, and I was in their board meetings, and I've talked with them, and I, even gone out to their mansions and places like that, and I've talked with them, I've seen them, I've watched them. They're serious about this. They are, they're not, the portrait that we get sometimes in the newspapers that all these rich people are out there just playing around.
Yeah.
Well, they're not. They're not just playing around. They're working really hard. They're working as hard as we are. And they're devoted to this whole thing. And they're very disciplined, and they are highly educated. I mean, these people have got advanced degrees, postdoctoral degrees. So, it's just, so you got to admire them for that. And they think that they're doing this in order to make the species survive. They think that it cannot survive currently. And so they're just going to basically let it collapse, put it back on an even footing, and then control it from that point. That's their rationale.
Where do we find information about the top 20 families?
Oh, just go out and banking families. Just go out and take a look at the banking families. Who owns the banks?
Like Mellons?
Yeah, the Mellons. You'll find the Mellons are there. The Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the people from with the old railroad fortunes, the Standard & Poor's people, the Rockefellers. So you'll go out and find out about this, and you can read their writings, their biographies and their autobiographies, where they talk about this. Open. I mean, they're not hiding it from anyone, not really. There it is out there. You can go back and take a look at the archives of the Ford Foundation and the Carnegie Foundation for International Peace. You can do all of those things. Those are all open public records. And if you have to take the time to go through them, obviously, but you'll see in there as they talk and as they plan and then as they implement. They'll say, we need to do this, this is our objective, this is how we're going to do it, and we need to do it within 5 years. And then you fast forward from 1920 to 1925, and you'll actually see that they actually did it in exactly the way that they said they were going to do it. So we have to understand that we're not at the top of this thing. We're
We're the serfs.
Well, yeah, we're the serfs. I mean, we're different than serfs because we're highly educated too. Yeah, we're highly educated, and we have access to all of this information as well.
So with the meditation part of it, is that we'd be able to keep our options?
Keep our options open, and also to be able to sort of remember. My objective has always been simply to reduce suffering and pain. Okay, yeah, we're working at a very personal level. As people, as things move into whatever's happening, and I don't know if Triffin's right. Of course, there's no way to stop this because it's been in motion for decades. If it were to all of a sudden correct itself, that would be wonderful, and we wouldn't be facing that particular tidal wave. But we would still be in a situation where, you know, we're gonna get ill, we're gonna grow older, we're gonna have, you know, kids who get sick, we're gonna have all these things. We're gonna be in a situation where, regardless of what's going on, we need to have these skills in order to, you know, to suffer less, to have less pain, and most importantly, not just for ourselves, but to help other people so that they also suffer less and have less pain. So we can train them in these same techniques. We can help them. We can use the hypnosis, you know, to help them through the pain and suffering. That's been the whole priority of my putting the program together and bringing it out here to you guys, because you guys can get it out into the community.
Yeah, and it's so, it's easy.
Yeah, it's easy. It's not mystical. It's not, this is real practical stuff that anybody can do.
Yeah.
And the more we do it, the better we get at it, and the more powerful it becomes for us, and the more pain and suffering we will be able to offset. Okay, regardless of what happens in the future. If what they say is happening is going to happen, if it really does happen, then like I said, we'll need to have all the skill sets we can in order to survive it and in order to come through it as unscathed as we can. And one of the things we have to be able to be aware of is that even contemplating this kind of thing is scary. So we have to be focused, we have to be centered, we have to look at it clearly, and we have to be unafraid. Because it's coming whether we're afraid or not. So we need to be able to look at it clearly. In fact, if we go back and take a look at some of the early Buddhist writings, the Buddha said, you know, after I had my realization and everything, he said it became obvious to me that there's this blind side, this unconscious aspect of human nature that we really can't look with, you know, with equanimity, without fear, at the real world, because it's horrifying. You know, it's vicious and nasty and brutal, and so we sort of avoid looking at it directly. And he said that's what I designed the program for, the Buddhist system, so that we could get to a point where we would have enough self-control and be able to look at the real world as it really is happening right in front of our very eyes, without rose-colored glasses, and just deal with it as it is.
Well, that's what happened to him, wasn't it? That he was a prince. He
Yeah.
never saw suffering or old
Yeah.
people or anything.
Exactly.
And then one day he woke up.
Yep, one day he realized that even in the middle of his princely palace, all of these things were going to happen to him, no matter what. He could end up impoverished tomorrow, he could, you know, it could be a coup, he could end up sick, he could end up dead, he could end up old and infirm. Absolutely. He said, that's going to happen to me no matter what. Doesn't matter how much money I've got, doesn't matter how rich my
Which
father
name
is.
is she referring to?
The Buddha.
Oh,
Yeah, the Buddha.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's how he started.
Okay.
He was a prince.
Oh,
He was raised, his daddy and mommy didn't want him to ever see death or old people or anything like that. So he was raised in this beautiful palace, kind of
Oh.
like, you know, Garden of Eden.
Right.
And then one day, I think he tripped or something happened, and he took a glimpse of the people around him. You know, there's no poor people, and then all of a sudden he saw a poor person. I think he saw no man.
Yeah, in succession he saw an old man and a beggar, okay, and then a dead person,
Yes, and then it's.
according to the legend.
According to the legend.
Yeah, which is their teaching fable about, you know, how we should wake up, going back to the cemetery contemplation.
Yeah. and then-
This will happen to us. We're not immune from all of this stuff, so we have to look at it, we have to understand it, we have to cope with it. We have to become strong, we have to become, because we are not this thing. It happens to this thing, it doesn't happen to us. We are spirit, we are soul, we are thinking substance, we are non-local, non-temporal, and that's what all the meditative techniques are intended to do, is to get us in touch with that actual reality that we are. Because once we've done that, once we've had that moment of Kensho and realized that, fear goes out the window. There's nothing to be afraid of anymore because we are untouchable. This thing, the avatar itself, which is the way that we interact with each other and the way that we practice compassion and love and friendship and all those high values that humans have, you know, these things are mortal and they will, you know, age and decay and die and can be overwhelmed by external events that are controlled by people who have the money. Okay, but which is the same, you know, again, the Egyptians, they enslaved thousands, billions for, you know, 3,000 years, 3,500 years. We would have been one of those slaves at the time, who knows? You know, the Romans, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, it doesn't matter. This is our time right now. And the same kinds of situations that they faced back then, we now face, just with a high-tech overlay. Okay? That's the only difference. There's more technology available now, which is good for us because we can now learn all of these things easier. So did that answer your questions and everything? Why we're talking about this? Okay, because it's important that we know this is not an abstract thing that we're doing here. This is real. We're going to need this. We already know that. I just wanted to reinforce that. Yeah.
Is the heat production during meditation somatically controlled? You can't overheat?
You can overheat. In fact, people who meditate, if you get into a very deep meditative state and are in one of the second or third meditative absorptions or further, the body itself, the avatar itself, will enter a concentration sweat. You'll wake up bathed in sweat.
But you can't overheat to a dangerous level, or
No.
it just gets uncomfortable?
Yeah, well, you won't even feel it until you wake up, until you return. Yeah, it can't hurt the organism.
So that the yogas who could concentrate in the snow with very little clothing
Yeah.
were actually physiologically okay. They were safe from frostbite.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, they were generating so much heat that it would melt the snow and turn it into steam. And in fact, you can do that. That's a fairly simple thing to learn how to do. Yeah, that's very simple. And then they go out and test themselves in the snow.
Yeah, I find it uncomfortable when I wake up.
Yeah. Yep, and that's it. And that's just normal. That will happen. That concentration
I
sweat is
thought
a
you
feature.
were wrong.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah. And that's simply because of the intense concentration and everything it does. They call it a concentration sweat.
But it is a physiological.
Yes, it's
not
physiological.
mental perception.
No, it's real. Yeah, the actual organism heats up. Remember, we talked about one of the concepts of the ancients was this ascetic idea, and asceticism is linked with this production of heat. That's why you found the ascetics, the people wandering around, with no clothes and out in the wilderness and everything, taking up these strange postures. It wasn't because that helped them in their meditation. It was because they were testing their meditative skills in the snow, standing and holding that posture for a long time. They were testing their skills, moving further and further into their skill level, taking the next 10,000 hours to get better at it. And what they were doing was they were literally focusing on that production of heat. That's a byproduct of this concentration, the concentration process. Okay? So again, all of that, we bring it all to right now. Everything that happened thousands of years ago is happening right this minute, and everything that they knew back then, we now know. And we can now span the distance and use it for our benefit.
And access to it.
Yeah, and have access to it and take it out into the larger community. Okay, where we can use it to relieve pain and suffering and help others. Yes, that's the key. That is the whole thing. Whatever happens, to these, the least of my brothers, it happens to me. And that's just a fact. That's just, that's not just some, random saying out of the Bible. That's an actual fact. Whatever happens to you all happens to me, one way or another. Either because we're related, because we're the same kind of a creature, but also because we're in this together.
We're connected.
Yeah, we're connected. All right, thanks.
Don't we get to practice?
Oh, yeah, you guys talk too much. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah, you guys have too many good questions and we never get to the practice. What I'll do is, first thing on the next seminar, we'll not do any theory, we'll just do practice.
Okay.
Okay? We'll just devote that time just to practicing. I'll show you a couple of different meditative, classical meditative things that feed into this concept here. All right?
I discovered that my problem was my computer,
Not the link and everything.
not the link.
Okay, well that's good.
Because my son was next door.
Okay, he came over and looked at it.
And, he could get it just,
Oh, okay. Oh, on his
His
computer.
computer.
Perfect.
but he's got to redo my computer. I screwed up royally.
Oh, okay.
Had a frequently.
Okay,
And-
like with viruses and things?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know, he says that I put AVG or something that is supposed to be a.
Right, that's like a freeware kind of
Yeah,
thing.
well, he said that stupid thing.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Yeah, it's not as good as the other ones.
Anyway, he screamed at me and said, then don't do it.
Don't do it again.
It's gonna take me a while to fix it, and I'm not gonna do it right now.
Go turn the light on,
Okay,
So,
so I can see.
so you're just hanging out until he fixes it?
yes.
Okay, all right,
So
well,
it'll
that's
possibly be this weekend.
perfect, perfect. And then you'll have access to it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Then,
sounds good. All right, we'll see you all next week.
Meditation, med cap, and then court system. is what it is.
Oh, you're welcome.
System,
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's, you know,
I'm not sure, I
you
would.
know, we don't need to get off into conspiracy theories, but it trends to that way because what's happening in the real world is actually
Oh,
focusing our attention on what's going on. And so, yeah, we need to,
I have two questions
Yes,
for you
sure.
next time,
okay.
because I think that other people want to hear them,
Well,
so I'll just
Sam-
remember them.
Oh, okay.
I'll remember them for next time.
Say them now.
Where are they?